Falsettos. Falsettos is a musical about I think I need someone else to cover this musical because I honestly have no idea what Falsettos is about.
Did you just say you don't know about Falsettos?
God, is that you?
No, it's Gillian. We've been producing plays for the past year and a half, and you brought me on last month to start making new videos? You know, to help with getting 2 videos a month as we keep pushing to an astounding 1,000 subscribers.
Oh, right. What am I paying you?
You think we're getting paid? That's adorable.
I really wish that wasn't a joke. But I'm happy you're here. Would you be willing to jump in and cover Falsettos?
Well, Brendon, that's what I'm here for, and let me tell you, I am obsessed with Falsettos. My sister introduced me to it during the summer of 2017, and it's been one of my favorite musicals ever since. I can't tell you how many car rides I've spent singing along to What Would I Do? The 2016 revival involved some of my favorite Broadway stars, and they did a great job exploring the complexities of the roles they were playing. But before we get into that, we need to set the scene. Hi everybody, I'm Gillian with Wait in the Wings, and today we're going to be diving deeper into the characters of Falsettos. To understand why the characters behave the way they do, allow me to take you back in time to 1981, the year the first act of Falsettos, March of the Falsettos, was written. 3 years prior, Harvey Milk was assassinated, and his killer was given a 7-year sentence for manslaughter, which was eventually reduced to 5 years. The political organization Moral Majority was opposing gay rights, pornography, feminism, and communism. The movie Cruising had been released, and it shed a very negative light on the gay scene in New York City. It was a tumultuous time. Gay people were not being portrayed in a positive way in mainstream media, and even if they were, they tended to be campy characters. March of the Falsettos was revolutionary because it portrayed gay people as real human beings with flaws and problems, but redeeming qualities as well. The first number in the musical is wonderfully sarcastic and aggressive. It immediately sets the stage for the world you're going to be living in for the next 2.5 hours. Early on, Mendel poses the question,
what do they do for love?
And it's a valid question considering the length these characters will go to not to be alone. Marvin and Whizzer outrightly admit they're both manipulative, so who can really say how things are going to turn out for these two lovers? Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. But then they go on this rant about the bed, because all the men in this musical are completely sex obsessed, but it is revealing how Whizzer and Mendel fawn over the bed, while Marvin, who is still very sexual, is more insecure. We end the first number with the very clear statement that none of these characters are sane. Marvin starts the next song by essentially placing us in the middle of all the conflict.
I divorced my wife, I left my child, and I ran off with a friend.
Then after giving us the time period and admitting himself how dysfunctional his family unit is, we have the entire premise for this story right in the first 5 minutes. Already, we see that Marvin has a compulsive need not only to be right, but to live truthfully at all times, no matter what the cost. He has no intention of hiding the fact that he's gay, but he doesn't think that changes anything for him. He still wants to maintain the picture-perfect all-American family and have a life with his lover too. This obviously causes a lot of strain on Whizzer and him, and one can't help but wonder as the musical progresses why they're even together. As the musical continues, we see the effect Marvin's choices have on those around him. Trina goes in to see Marvin's psychiatrist and starts unfolding the convoluted past of her and Marvin's marriage. We have the first indication that perhaps this was a shotgun wedding. Then Trina goes on to tell Mendel how Marvin gave her not 1, but 2 STDs throughout the course of their 12-year marriage. It's apparent that Trina has really been put through the ringer. And now, even after they're separated, she can't escape Marvin. But then we get a glimpse into Jason's world, and his first statement after the opening is scathing.
Daddy is a prick!
What?
He said,
Yes?
Daddy isn't mine!
It's apparent immediately that he wants absolutely nothing to do with his father. This kid, more than anything, has truly been a victim of Marvin and Trina's unstable relationship. as the characters keep repeating the common phrase,
Love is blind.
they add a twist at the end, saying,
Love's unkind, spiteful in a million ways.
and it's interesting to see how they pretty much are all in agreement that love sucks. Marvin then goes on a separate rant about how awful love is, which is so ironic considering he needs at least 3 people's constant love and attention or else he goes absolutely crazy. But then the psychiatrist swoops in, and although he's arguably the most screwed up character in this whole musical, I can't help but appreciate the pun in his name. The characters don't start to see through Mendel's facade until the second act, so for now they see him as a savior.
His name is Mendel.
And here we get a taste of Whizzer's beautiful harmonies. Throughout the first act, he has the most intricate and unique melodies, and I think this not only shows his flamboyant nature, but it represents the whimsical nature he has about him. After we get a picture of what family life is like, we are given an intimate look into Marvin and Whizzer's relationship, and oh boy, is it dysfunctional. One could see it as playful bickering at first, but then you're led to wonder if they actually hate each other. They actually say at one point they enjoy fighting, which doesn't seem healthy at all. Whizzer starts mentioning other men he finds more attractive and richer than Marvin, and later Marvin brings up the fact that Whizzer has the tendency to sleep around. We're not sure if this is a projection of Marvin's fear or an actual fact, but Whizzer comes from a culture of gay individuals who felt their freedom to express their sexuality was a hard-won trophy. And that may be part of the reason why he's wary to commit to Marvin. We also see them get into the argument of the length of their relationship several times.
We've been together for 9 months.
10 months.
9 months.
10
9 months.
10 months.
Marvin wants the relationship to feel more validified, so he rounds up, while Whizzer wants to make it seem more casual, so he rounds down. We can assume this is the longest relationship Whizzer has ever been in, and he's honestly probably scared. They've set a certain precedent for lust in their relationship, and Whizzer must be terrified of what happens after passion dies, considering this is uncharted territory for him, and to him, when passion dies, the relationship dies too. Whizzer is the first to throw around the threat of them leaving one another in the musical, but this must be something that they throw around a lot, considering how casually they handle it. This is also the first look we get into the games Whizzer plays, as he taunts Marvin with callous responses to Marvin's intimate longing for Whizzer's love and commitment. Next, we see Marvin at the psychiatrist, and when Trina is brought up, Mendel can hardly control himself. He asks Marvin if it's okay if Trina comes to speak with him again, and uses Jason as an excuse, saying he's concerned about Jason's behavior and wants to discuss it further with her. You would think that a professional psychiatrist would try to avoid becoming involved with his patient's ex-wife, especially when the situation is so messy. And to use Jason as a way to see her when the kid should actually be seeing a psychiatrist seems oddly manipulative. Marvin tries to talk to Mendel about his complicated feelings involving Trina, but then Mendel starts to actually defend her. Marvin suggests Trina was withholding, and it's interesting that this is mentioned because in Trousers, the first installment of the Marvin trilogy, which includes 3 one-act musicals entitled In Trousers, March of the Falsettos, and Falsettoland, Trina speculates that Marvin is the way he is because his mother withheld love from him. But Trina didn't sign up to be his mom, so she withheld her love from him too. But she also did this in part to protect herself from Marvin. Mendel explains this to Marvin, saying she's not a cold person, it was intentional. And after giving his only bit of helpful insight for the session, he goes on to ask a slew of pretty inappropriate questions for a therapy appointment.
Does she sleep in the nude?
No.
No.
In the final part of the session, we get a deeper look into Marvin and Jason's relationship. Marvin tries to bond with Jason, but he's so bitter towards his father and so quick to blame him for everything and anything.
We go to ball games.
The ball is tossed.
The pitcher's handsome.
Yeah, and our team lost.
While there's really no correlation between the events at the baseball game, Marvin doesn't know how to convey that to Jason because of how much Jason despises him. Jason really does have a problem with his father being gay, but mainly because it caused such a disruption in their family life. While Marvin says that love is the most beautiful thing, Jason argues that games are. And this is most likely because every interaction of love that Jason sees is highly dysfunctional, and he wants nothing to do with it. Jason was never taught how to express loving emotions, so instead he is snide and sarcastic. But he also lives in constant fear of becoming like his father, both in terms of personality and sexuality. He starts spiraling at the thought that it may be out of his control. He even asks Mendel if it's fatal because of the striking similarities between himself and his father. And while Jason's fears may seem highly irrational, in 1979 it was partially validified by the negative connotations surrounding the word gay at the time. Jason really is too smart for his own good. He knows exactly what to say to get under his parents' skin, but knows he can get away with it because they both feel bad for what they've put him through. And while his upbringing is certainly a big factor, like Marvin, Jason won't accept responsibility for his behavior. When Marvin and Trina are begging him to see a psychiatrist, he won't even listen to them and demands to speak with Whizzer instead. Whizzer is the only semi-stable adult in Jason's life, and he really values his opinion. And it's only when Whizzer says Jason should see a psychiatrist that he agrees to go. We're completely dragged back into the character's chaotic world with the next musical number. Trina's at the psychiatrist, Jason is playing a chess game, and Whizzer and Marvin are at home fighting. Multiple times throughout the musical, we see Marvin try and force Whizzer into the role of a traditional housewife, and honestly, it's really disturbing. However, Whizzer is unwilling to fully commit to that role, and Marvin suggests that this thing between them is burning out fast, but it's a completely empty threat. Marvin is too desperate for love, and although he might think highly of himself in terms of intelligence, his insecurities cause him to be needy. We start to see Whizzer and Trina both bond over their shared experiences dealing with Marvin and the trouble he's put them through. It's really heartbreaking to see because all Trina wanted was to be the perfect housewife. We can assume that Trina was raised to believe that marriage should be her main goal and that men have always controlled her life. She may not like it, but it's safe and comfortable for her. That's most likely why she stayed with Marvin for so many years, but now that he's gone, she's lost. Trina is a perfectionist and a pro at acting like nothing is wrong, but finally everything builds up and she can't handle it anymore. She can't even bring herself to hate her ex-husband's new gay lover because he's actually a decent guy. And with no cathartic release, she feels as if she's going insane. She admits she knew Marvin was cheating. However, it was a complete shock to her when she discovered it was with men. And now to make things worse, this is also the point in the musical where she realizes she has feelings for Mendel. Trina invites Mendel over to finally speak with Jason, and of course, Mendel takes this as more of an opportunity to try and get with Trina than to help Jason out. Jason actually admits his fears about becoming like his father to Mendel, but the only bit of advice he can offer is to tell Jason to suck it up, cause his situation isn't that bad.
Why don't you feel alright for the rest of your life? Why don't you feel alright for the rest of your life? Why don't you feel alright for the rest of your life?
Yeah. A+ counseling here. But then they share a sweet moment where Jason asks Mendel what his intentions are concerning Trina. Although he knows it's not his responsibility, Jason really loves Trina, and he feels like he has to look out for her because if he doesn't, nobody else will. And then, finally, we have the marriage proposal. And again, Mendel finds a way to be weird about it. For a psychiatrist, he's incredibly inarticulate and spends most of the time babbling. Trina even has to help him get his point across. We see how bitter Marvin is about the whole situation. He even tries to make Trina seem like the bad guy here. He goes as far as to say he wants a partner who knows what love is, as if he isn't mostly to blame for this whole situation. We start to see Mendel and Marvin go head to head as Marvin feels increasingly threatened by Mendel. Mendel admits he feels guilty and annoyed about the whole situation, but then starts saying he's much like Jung and Freud, you know, two geniuses in the field of psychology. What a nice humble brag to just throw in there. Marvin can't believe that Trina loves Mendel, and while I have my issues with the guy, I think Trina deserves to find love and be happy, but Marvin is acting as if it's some crime for her to move on from him when he's the one who left her and ran off with his gay lover. It's so incredibly childish that he can't even find a way to coexist with her if he isn't the one in control. But Mendel really isn't helping the situation. Mendel even says he bought a family, which seems like a really crude way to refer to this whole messed up situation. And again, Trina is just left in the debris to cope with everything. Trina knows it's absolutely crazy how all these men are acting. She's tired of all these inconsiderate men who are controlling her life, but she needs them or else she feels lost. She admits she has some doubts about marrying Mendel, but she later says she'll ignore them. I think she's so desperate for a semi-healthy relationship that she doesn't even want to be picky about who it's with. It's tragic to see her at the end of Trina's song imagining a happy life for herself, talking about how she'll finally laugh and smile, and one can't help but blame her for just wanting a normal life. After Trina's song, we move into the title number of the first act, March of the Falsettos, which is honestly one of the oddest musical numbers I've ever seen. And it personally took me a while to figure out what the importance of it was and why it was even in the show. The military march seen in the choreography and repeated in the lyrics is there to remind the audience that physical displays of affection aren't masculine, that real men don't show emotion, and they never touch other men. All the men, except Jason, are singing in a falsetto voice, which is symbolic of their childish nature. This musical number is a representation of the whimsical world children live in before they grow up and face reality. They reference never mincing as a way to degrade the stereotype of a gay man who acts feminine. The characters suggest that in order to be acceptable, one must appear manly and act normal. This helps to explain some of the hatred Marvin has towards Whizzer, because he refuses to hide his flamboyance, and the only way Marvin can deal with this is by forcing him into the role of a housewife. The reason why this whole number is set up in such a farcical way is to show how ridiculous all these opinions are, and to poke fun at those who actually believe them. Next, we have the chess game, and this is where things really start to fall apart. The scene is set with Marvin and Whizzer playing chess, and Whizzer is struggling to make a first move. Marvin directs him, and at first Whizzer is stubborn and doesn't want to listen, but he eventually gives in. But soon the tables are suddenly flipped as Marvin struggles to make a move, and Whizzer is instructing him on what to do. The crazy thing is that Whizzer is actually able to get Marvin to listen to him. The first snide remark is thrown around as Marvin states he only cares about winning, while Whizzer says he only cares about sex and money. Whizzer takes another jab at Marvin, saying that Marvin needs a man who's brainy, which Marvin doesn't believe Whizzer is. However, the chess game is our first indication that Whizzer may be much smarter than he's letting on. The next threat is thrown around as Whizzer suggests they should call it quits, and finally Marvin is pushed over the edge when Whizzer takes control of the chess game and allows himself to win. And we're left to wonder if Whizzer already knows how to play chess and was just playing dumb. Marvin already doesn't believe Whizzer loves him, and he's so terrified of being hurt that he calls Whizzer's bluff and actually goes to get a suitcase so that he can set the terms of the breakup and make peace with it by believing he's the one who ended it. However, I don't believe he actually wants to break up with him. Even though all their threats to each other are empty, Whizzer is getting fed up with Marvin's games. So he in turn calls Marvin on his bluff, takes the suitcase, and leaves. So Whizzer and Marvin are fitfully separated, Trina and Mendel are happily engaged, and the characters are settling into the terms of their new lives. We see Jason and Whizzer commiserate over how unhappy they are, and this just further exemplifies the kinship they share throughout the show. As Whizzer finishes packing his things, he sings us a beautiful ballad of contradictions about his emotions towards Marvin. While Whizzer does taunt Marvin a lot, it's refreshing to see him own up to the fact that he does in fact play games. This is a milestone in maturity for Whizzer, and he's the first character we see start to grow up and come out of that selfish and immature world of a child. He realizes that the games he played cost him a lover, even if he can't quite decide if he's relieved or heartbroken not to be with Marvin anymore. Now that Marvin's alone, he's 10 times more bitter about Mendel and Trina's engagement. he receives the wedding invitation, and this is truly the point in the musical where he starts to lose it. He storms in and starts degrading Trina for wanting a loving husband instead of just continuing to coexist with him. He starts yelling about how she only chose Mendel to make him look bad, screaming at her for denying what they had, again when he's the one that ended things. Mendel states Marvin is acting untrained, and while that's a really crass way to put it, again I have to agree with him. Trina and Whizzer are seen bonding again over their shared trauma caused by Marvin. And you'd think this would finally make Marvin realize that he's the problem here, but no. He has other ways of handling it. Finally, when Marvin's worst fear is realized that maybe Whizzer didn't love him after all, this loose cannon fires and he hits Trina in front of her fiancé and in front of his son. Of all the ways he could have handled his anger, it's excruciating to see Trina at the brunt of such brutal force and violence when she's been nothing but a victim in this whole situation. Immediately, Marvin regrets it, but the damage has already been done. Trina begs him to let her go, saying she's not ashamed to have loved him and wishes he felt the same way. She wishes they could appreciate the relationship they had, stay civil for Jason's sake, and both move on and be happy. Jason is even further traumatized after seeing this act of domestic abuse, but it's at this point in the musical that he, for the first time, admits that he does, in fact, love his father. And while Marvin later says he only wanted to have a child to see his face in theirs, he still loves Jason and wants him to make it out all right. Trina again implies it was a shotgun wedding, but that she tried to make the best of it. And Whizzer contradicts himself one final time to admit that he does love Marvin. And this is always where I think the first act ends. It always confused me why the first act ended with the intimate solo, father to son, that Marvin sings to Jason, rather than with the grandiose final refrain of "I never wanted to love you." And that's because I always thought of this as a story about Marvin and Whizzer's relationship. However, Falsettos, at its core, is really a story about a father and son growing and learning together, and Marvin eventually becoming the father figure that Jason needs. I always think I like the first act more because of all the drama and conflict, but then I actually watched the second act, and it's so beautiful to see the story start to resolve and to watch the characters grow up. For some of these characters, the journey to maturity takes a lot longer than others. For example, Mendel says he'll bring women from the wrong side of the tracks to Jason's bar mitzvah, then claims he's the only one fit to raise Jason because Marvin and Trina are too busy fighting about the tedious details of the bar mitzvah. So, he's still working on marching out of falsetto land well into the second act, but Jason is starting to come to the conclusion that maybe he's straight after all, and it's only when he comes to this realization that he's able to start mending the relationship between himself and Marvin. He goes on a prolonged prepubescent rant about what girls he should invite to his bar mitzvah and how he only wants girls he lusts for, and while this is still fairly immature, it's pretty good progress for a 12-year-old. It seems like during the 2-year gap between the end of the first act and the beginning of the second act, Whizzer and Jason have been in some contact. Jason invites Whizzer to the baseball game, and everyone is completely taken aback. One can't help but wonder if Jason is playing matchmaker or if he really does just like Whizzer and want him there for the support. It's odd to see Marvin almost revert to an elementary level of flirting as he taunts and teases Whizzer, but what's even stranger is that Whizzer goes with it and accepts to see Marvin again. It's so sweet to see them reconnect after 2 years, and it shows that they did love each other, but perhaps they needed time to grow up and mature before the universe was ready to put them back in each other's lives. When Whizzer and Marvin get back together, it's odd to see the tables turned, as Trina is the one that's distressed about it. I think she's just distraught thinking about what happened last time they were together, and she doesn't need that drama stacked on top of everything with the bar mitzvah. Jason can't seem to understand why everyone is so upset about all this bar mitzvah business. Since Jason never got the chance to just be a kid, he's relishing in the attention from this whole celebration, and seeing it as a great opportunity to get rich. However, all the tension is upsetting him and causes him to almost backtrack over any progress made towards maturity that he's made and threaten to cancel the bar mitzvah, purely for the sake of upsetting his parents. Mendel swoops in again with some more top-notch advice and tells Jason to just brush it off because everyone hates their parents. It's normal and part of the family cycle, and one day he'll understand. I don't think this is the best advice, but it seems to comfort Jason for the time being. We see Marvin's milestone in maturity in What More Can I Say, which is definitely on my list of top 5 musical numbers that make me emotionally unstable. Marvin is finally able to be vulnerable and admit his love for Whizzer. Although it is interesting to note that Whizzer is asleep during this whole musical number, as if Marvin is still going to some lengths to protect himself, but it's still a very big step for him. Marvin boasts about his intelligence throughout the entire show, but when it comes time for him to express his love for Whizzer, he states he sings a rondelay, which is defined as a simple song with a refrain. He strips himself of his ego, and it truly is sincere. The cruelest thing to me is that 2 songs later we see Whizzer fall ill, and I can't help but wonder what William Finn has against me and why he personally wants to see me suffer. I find it important to note, though, that while Falsettos was revolutionary in its portrayal of gay people, the characters are still human, and Whizzer getting sick wasn't a way to give in to the cliche that people in gay relationships suffer, but to me it just further exemplifies that even happy endings don't always need to come to a conventional resolution. As plans for the bar mitzvah continue, Jason keeps battling with whether or not he'll cancel it. But now he has a pretty valid reason. He wants Whizzer to be able to attend, but he's still in the hospital. As the argument continues, we see Mendel stride towards maturity as he's the one to explain to Jason that they don't know when Whizzer will get better or if he'll ever get better at all. It's touching to see him finally step up and start to be almost like a father figure to Jason in that moment. We see how much Marvin and Whizzer's relationship has mellowed and how they've both grown throughout the musical. Marvin has stepped up and is trying to be the strong one, with Whizzer being sick and all, but we can tell it's taking a toll on him. Watching Marvin desperately try to hold back his sobs and then quickly composing himself before Whizzer can notice has absolutely always wrenched my heart out. I literally cry every single time I watch this part. When Marvin and Whizzer and the 2 lesbians next door that are introduced in the second act start singing this beautiful chorus together, if you listen closely, you can tell that Whizzer's harmonies are less grandiose. It's quite a contrast from the whimsical melodies Whizzer sings in the first act, and I feel like this is a representation of his declining health. We've seen Whizzer grow up a lot during the show, and he's handling the fact that he's dying pretty well, but even he has some moments where it all gets to be too much. Whizzer describes death like a vicious lover, much like Marvin once was. I think this offers him some comfort in his darkest moments, thinking the Grim Reaper will come to him much like an old lover. This is the lowest we've ever seen Whizzer, but his lamenting is suddenly interrupted by a surprise. Jason decided to have his bar mitzvah in Whizzer's hospital room. Here we see the resolution to Jason's journey to manhood as he forfeits all the gifts and glory to have a celebration that would include Whizzer. No one is quite sure how they all got here, how they all, for the most part, made it out okay and completed their march into manhood, but they know that, at least for this moment, they're all together. We see Marvin fill the shoes of the father figure Jason has always longed for, and Jason goes through with bar mitzvah and completes his transition into manhood. Whizzer becomes faint during the ceremony and starts to collapse, but before he leaves, he desperately reaches out for Jason. This is another moment that truly makes me lose all composure. It's so incredibly touching that this is the last thing we see Whizzer do while he's alive. He's so proud of the man Jason has become, and he's grateful to have witnessed his transformation over the last couple of years. Marvin later brings up the fact that Whizzer is the only man Jason would have accepted, and it's heartwarming to see how their relationship flourished over these last 2 acts. In the wake of Whizzer's death, Marvin is left to ask what would have happened if he had never ended up with Whizzer. This takes the cake for number 1 on my list of musical numbers that make me completely emotionally unstable. It's such a beautiful retrospection on their relationship, but how they've helped each other grow. When Whizzer re-enters, they still have that playful banter that was characteristic for their relationship. And it's interesting to note that Whizzer mentions how liking men metaphorically ended Marvin's life, although it literally ended Whizzer's. But despite all the issues that Whizzer and Marvin had, they never actually had problems with themselves being gay. It's so important to have representation like this in media. Prior to this, you might have seen gay characters, but they were usually tortured by their sexuality. And to portray the characters in this musical as honest people, not as comical or absurd, is just as important as well. After everything Marvin and Whizzer have been through, neither of them would trade the world for the love they shared. It's agonizing to see how it looks like all they want to do is run into each other's arms, but they're unable to. I think this drives home the message that affection is not a matter of masculinity, but rather a matter of love. And any societal expectations of what is acceptable to express and what isn't should be thrown out the window. Who's to say it's not masculine for these two lovers to long for an embrace? It's ludicrous to think that just an act earlier, this was a belief that Marvin held. His transformation throughout the musical is astounding. Each of the male characters had their own individual concept of what their journey to manhood entailed, and the whole musical does an amazing job at showing the audience that there's no one way to be a man.
What's up, Run Crew? We hope you enjoyed that video. If you've enjoyed the content that we've been making and you want to satisfy more of that theatrical craving, then head on over to our Patreon using the link in the description below. And please remember to like and subscribe as we continue pushing towards our astounding 1,000 subscriber special, What Went Wrong Live, in front of a studio audience. Thanks, and remember to live truthfully in those imaginary circumstances. Only took 50 shots.